All right, so we're going to be talking about Bohr models and how to draw Bohr models and also what to do when we have a Lewis dot diagram. So when we are talking about a Bohr model, we're going to do an example of carbon together. Now, I've gone ahead and drawn all of this. Okay, so this middle circle is the nucleus. And what we show in the nucleus is my protons and neutrons. Because remember, your protons and neutrons make up the nucleus, and they're in the center of the atom. Okay, so when we're drawing Bohr models, this center circle is going to be the nucleus. Now, all of these circles that you see that have kind of dotted lines, these are where you're going to put your electrons. So as discussed yesterday in class, we talked about how the periods equal my number of energy levels. So if it's in period 1, so we're going to go ahead and look at the period. Okay, so these numbers on the side are your periods. So you have period 1, period 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I were to look at carbon, okay, and I were to take it all the way over to the side, it is in period 2. So what that is telling me is I am going to use these first two energy levels. I'm not going to get to the third energy level, and I'm not going to get to the fourth energy level. Now, you're probably wondering, Mr. Sasfi, what do these numbers represent? Well, these are the max amount of electrons that you can have on any given energy level. So that first energy level can only hold 2. The second one can hold 8. The third one can hold 8. The fourth one can hold 18. Now, we're not going to go further than calcium on period 4 or the energy level 4. Okay, so if you can do the first 20 elements, okay, so calcium is going to be the last element that you guys will ever be tested on. So anything after calcium is not something we are going to be testing on, nor are we going to be covering it when we talk about Bohr models. And we'll talk about that later when we get into Lewis dot. Okay, so you do not need to put any of these on your sheet, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what you're to be doing. So I'm going to go ahead and look at carbon. If I look at carbon, it is in period 2. So that's using 2 energy levels. But if I look at carbon, I need to figure out my protons, neutrons, and electrons, assuming the atom's neutral. So anytime we do Bohr models, we're assuming the atom is neutral. So I'm going to say that now. So right now, I have 6 protons because my atomic number is 6. So I'm going to go ahead, and I am going to say I have 6 protons. And I'm going to put a positive just because my protons have a positive charge. When I look at neutrons, I have to look at my mass number, rounded. So remember, if that decimal is 0.5 or higher, this whole number rounds up to, in this case, would be a 13. But if it's 0.4 or lower, you round it down. Okay, and so this number is going to round down to 12 because it's between 12 and 13, and that decimal is a 0.0. Okay, so your mass number is 12. So remember, your mass number, if you guys were to draw out your complete element symbol, you would have carbon, and then you would see a 6 here, and then you would see a 12 up here. All right, and so this is your element symbol, and this is nothing new to you guys. But what you're going to do is you already know your protons because this number, this number equals my protons. Okay, so that equals my protons. Now, if I subtract these two numbers, your mass number minus your atomic number, that is going to give me my number of neutrons. So I have 6 neutrons. And I got all of these. Let me make this bigger. And I got all of these based on the periodic table. So I took the rounded number and I subtracted it from the atomic number. And so that's going to give me my element symbol, which in turn I can figure out my neutrons. So I should have 6 neutrons. Now is where we get to the part that I want you guys to follow. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit drawing, and I'm going to use the stroke of 8 to use my electrons. Now we are going to draw electrons, or we could just use dots, okay, to show electrons. This first electron or this first energy level can only hold 2 electrons. So what I like to do is I do opposites. So I'm going to go ahead and do top and bottom. That's showing 2 electrons. Now, I have 6 electrons because I have 6 protons. And remember, we're assuming the atom's neutral. So if I have 6 protons, I have to have 6 electrons. And so far, if I had 6 and I used 2, I should have 4 left. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead over on the side. I'm just going to tally how much I started with. Okay, and the reason I started with 6 electrons is because I had 6 protons, and they have to equal for my charge to be 0. But I just used 2, so I have 4 left. Okay, so I have 4 electrons left, and the reason being is I've shown 2 here. Now, some of you are probably going to be asking, Mr. Sasfi, can I draw the electrons left and right? That's fine. Okay, I always start at the top and go to the bottom on that first shell. Now, what I like to do is I go ahead and I start on the second energy level, but I'm going to go clockwise. So I'm going to go top, right, bottom, left. Now, I have added 4 more electrons. I can hold 8, but I only had 4 left. So in doing so, okay, I have no more electrons left. So I just used 4, and I have 0 electrons left. That is how I know I'm done. Okay, so when I go to my Lewis dot for carbon, I am looking, and I'm going to draw with a different color. I am looking on this outer shell right here. How many electrons do you see? Okay, now we discussed it can hold 8 electrons, but carbon doesn't have enough to fill 8 electrons. I only have 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we're going to go ahead and do is you're going to use the symbol for the element. In this case, it is carbon. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the electrons. Now I used 8 on the model, okay, on the Bohr's model, but on the Lewis dot I'm going to use a stroke of 4, okay, and so it's going to look exactly like the outside of your valence electrons is what we call them, okay, so it's going to look like your outermost shell. So what I want you to do is go ahead and look at oxygen. We're going to go ahead and do oxygen. Okay, so I'm going to let you guys do hydrogen on your own. So looking at oxygen, so once again, I'm going to go to the text and I'm going to add. Now I use 8. So I'm going to use, too small. Let's use 12. So I'm going to put nucleus because this is my nucleus. And then I have protons equal, neutrons equal. Okay, and so I'm going to center that up just so they're in the center. So I'm going to go back to my periodic table. And I am going to go ahead and look at oxygen. Well, once again, it's in period 2. So what that's telling me is I'm only going to use this first energy level and this second energy level. Okay, so I'm not going to get to this third or this fourth level because I don't have enough electrons to fill that second energy level. So let's go ahead and looking at oxygen. I have 8 protons, so I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. So I have 8 positives. If I look at the mass number, it's going to be a rounded number to 16. So 16, so if I went ahead and drew the model oxygen, then you're going to have an atomic number of 8 and 16. Okay, so we've drawn the element symbol. So what you're going to do to find your number of neutrons, you subtract these two numbers. Okay, so 16 minus 8 is 8, and this equals my number of neutrons. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fill this in. I have 8 neutrons, and neutrons don't have a charge, so notice I don't add a charge. Now, if I am assuming the atom is neutral, my protons and electrons have to equal. So if I have 8 protons, I have to have 8 electrons. Okay, so I need to show them in my Bohr model. So once again, I am going to go ahead and start my drawing. So I'm using a stroke of 8. So once again, only 2 electrons can go on that first energy level. So I have 1, 2. Notice I had 2 top bottom. If you like to do left, right, that's fine. And I have 6 electrons left, because remember, I had 8 electrons because I had 8 protons, and I just used 2, so that gives me 6 left. So what I'm going to do is place 1, and I go clockwise, 2, 3, 4. Now, once you have 4, you have to start doubling them up. Okay, and we'll explain this later as to why this is, but this will help you when we get into bonding. Okay, so this electron, so I have 6, I have 2 more to place. So I'm going to place 1 here, and then I'm going to place 1 here. Notice I'm pairing them up. Okay, so when I go to my Lewis dot, once again, I am looking on this outermost shell, and I'm just highlighting it so you can see where I'm getting the electrons. We call these the valence electrons. These are my outermost shell. So when I am going ahead, I'm going to draw or write the element symbol. In this case, it's oxygen. And then I am going to draw, and I use the stroke 4, my outermost shell. So my valence or my Lewis dot is going to look like this. I have 2 on each side, and I have 1 on the bottom and 1 on the left. So notice it's resembling exactly what you see. Okay, so what I want you guys to go ahead and do is finish the rest of these 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Mr. Sasfi, I have also put the answers up on my desk. So when you're done, go up and check your answers. If you have any questions, make sure you're asking. And then also go ahead and start your homework, which is posted in Google Classroom.